Hi, Helena.
Hi.
We're just going to hang out while other people. There we go. This webinar is being recorded. By participating in this webinar, you agree that Angel Robbins owns all rights to this recording, and you grant her permission to use your image and any written or spoken comments you choose to offer during the course of this webinar in any manner she chooses. So it's good to see all of you, even though I can't see any of you because all of you took your faces off the screen. So of course you're welcome to do that, but it's definitely more fun for me and Geschichte if there's some interaction. Otherwise it's like I'm talking to just a computer screen. So while other people are coming onto the call, we'll just go ahead and get going since it's already 10. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about me in case you have not been on one of these webinars before. My name is Angelique. My nickname is Angel. When I was 19 years old, I had a near-death experience, and during that near-death experience, I came face-to-face with this huge energy, which I called God. It responded back to me through thought that its name was Geschichte. I learned later that that word Geschichte means history and story in German. And through the course of the next 15 years, basically, I was led to study with someone who also was in contact with the angelic realm, and therefore I did study actually with the angelic realm. In the year 2012, I had another near-death experience, and during that near-death experience, something occurred. I can't really put into words what occurred, but after that occurred, I started channeling Geschichte, meaning Geschichte started speaking through me. So that's what these webinars are. I will sing a song that Geschichte taught me when I was in my 20s. I'm 40 years old now. And after I sing that song, Geschichte will be the ones interacting with you. So what I know about Geschichte, they say that they are the angelic realm. They're here to assist humanity into a new world, a new type of earth. One that is more harmonious, peaceful, loving, fun in general, and overall healthier. So everything they speak to you guys about is for this goal. So I'm going to go ahead and sing, and after that you'll be speaking to Geschichte. So just feel free to relax and close your eyes. I'm also going to mute all of you. Om Sei Safanata. Om Sei Safanata. Ooh, ooh, hey, safe Ninkum, Seiken, safe Ninkum, Seiken. Ooh, say, save come, seiken, hey, for no day, hey, for no day, come for day, he come for day, come for day.
That's it to do.
Ye come for day, hey, for no day, hey, for no day, he come for day, he come for day, he come for day, hey, for no day, hey, for no day, home for noon, sun, tien kenu, home for noon, sun, tien kenu, Nyam 48, Nyam 48, home for noon, sun, tien kenu. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. At this moment, we cannot see any of you on our screen. We would appreciate it if some of you would show your faces, because it's very strange for us to be talking to you guys if you're not going to show up on the screen. Okay? These are meant to be interactive. That's why there is the ability to, thank you, Donna. There is the ability to ask questions in these webinars. And so they're not meant to be complete monologues by us. We know that we do generally give a monologue, but overall, what we find is that when humanity can ask questions in regard to things that are going on in their own life, it really affects everyone else who's listening, whether it be right now or later on, because all of you have similar things going on in your lives. And the way that we will speak to you about how to address these circumstances going on in your lives or these difficulties, other people also can find resolution through what we speak to you. So there's nothing that is inappropriate to ask, in our opinion, and we really appreciate the interaction. Okay? So the art of forgiveness, that's what today is about. It's a very important topic because what we notice regarding humanity is that for the most part, you guys have a very difficult time forgiving. And one of the reasons that you guys have a difficult time forgiving a lot of the time is because it's actually a pressure that you put onto yourselves, as though it's something that you're supposed to do instead of something that you want to do. Okay? So if you've ever examined your life, if you've examined what's easiest for you to do in your life, you'll notice that the things that are easiest for you to do, the things that are the most enjoyable for you to do, are the things that you want to do, not the things that you feel pressured to do, right? So we want to approach this with this kind of understanding, meaning we want you to understand why forgiveness seriously benefits you. Because if you can understand that forgiveness really benefits you, then you will be more likely in a place to want to forgive instead of feeling like it's some type of obligation or duty. Okay? So why should you want to forgive? We're going to explain it in the way that we see it. Okay? What happens when someone forgives is essentially they let go of something, okay? So what does that mean to let go? It means to essentially untangle. It means to essentially separate your energy from someone else's energy, okay? So to be angry with someone or to hold a grudge against someone is an entanglement, okay? And that entanglement causes you pain. Now, does it cause the other person pain? Not in the way that it causes you pain, okay? Does it create disruptions on their part? It does. Are they usually aware of those disruptions? Not often. Are you aware of the disruptions? Usually. Are you aware of the pain it's causing you? Yeah, you're aware of the pain it's causing you because it's anger, right? It's anger, it's judgment, it's that grudge, that feeling. So in essence, the main person that it's causing heartache and pain toward is yourself. Okay. And we know you've probably heard this before. It's not like this is a super new concept or anything. But it doesn't sink in. We know that a lot of people are saying it, but it doesn't seem to sink in with you guys that truly it's causing you a lot of pain to hold on to anger, okay? So we want you to understand that anger is meant to be a fleeting emotion, okay? Anger is meant to be an emotion which helps you get through something. If you've ever examined the energy of anger, you'll realize that it has a certain type of momentum to it, a certain type of movement to it, okay? It's not a stagnating energy, or at least it's not meant to be. So anger in itself, the emotion itself, it's not like it's a bad emotion necessarily. It's an emotion which is to help you get from point A to point B, okay? But what happens is that people stay stuck in it like a loop. And it's when you're stuck in that anger loop where it seems impossible to forgive. And what often happens in people's minds is the thought process of, if I forgive this person, it means that I'm letting them off the hook for something that they did. And I don't want to give them that message. I don't want to give someone the message that it's okay for you to have done what you've done. And that's what forgiveness means to a lot of people. It means that they're giving someone permission to continue acting like a fool or whatever. And that's not actually what forgiveness is. Forgiveness, like everything else we teach, the basis of it is still in a place of honesty, okay? You can't forgive someone if you're not honest about the way you feel toward them. All right? So an example of this is if there's someone in your life and you can't admit that you're even mad at that person, then there's absolutely no way for you to forgive that person. Because you first have to realize that you're angry with them before you can practice forgiveness, okay? So denial doesn't work in any scenario that we teach you guys. The very first and most important thing is the honesty and the awareness. With the honesty, with the awareness, you have something to work with, okay? Now, once you realize that you're in a place of anger with someone, then you have some things to assess. You have some really important questions to ask yourself. Number one, did I contribute to this dynamic? Okay, that's an important question to ask. Because often when you have a relationship where someone needs forgiveness, the other person in that scenario that needs forgiveness is you. Because often you've contributed to a dynamic which has caused you pain. And it's easier to put blame on the other person than it is to put blame on yourself quite often. Okay? So in many scenarios, you're not going to just be practicing forgiveness to someone else. You're going to be practicing forgiveness toward yourself. Because it really does take two to tango. It's not that often that you have zero input into a dynamic. We're not saying that it doesn't ever happen, because sometimes it does happen. But we are saying that more often than not, it's two contributing to a dynamic. It's two, at least two, contributing to pain, okay? And so you've got to be able to get honest with yourself about your contribution and the other person's contribution to whatever pain this is, whatever needs forgiven, all right? The second thing that needs to be assessed is, what were my expectations in whatever this unfolding is? What was I expecting from this person? And once you ask yourself that, what was I expecting from this person or from these people? Then you have to ask yourself, do they know that I had that expectation? Or was that just something that exists in my head and in my awareness? Did I ever communicate that that was my expectation? And if this is something that's accumulated over time, then did you ignore addressing it over time so it built up into this giant grudge? Right? Do you see what we're saying? Sometimes it's hard to forgive because you haven't allowed yourself to address it. Not only have you not allowed yourself to address it, but you never really communicated what your expectations were, okay? So the interesting thing about being in a place where you feel like you have to forgive, it means that you absolutely did have expectations in that area. If you didn't have expectations in that area, then there really wouldn't be any reason to forgive, okay? This is a somewhat complex topic because it's easy to say that, and it's easy to say I don't have expectations, but it's not realistic in what you guys experience on a daily basis. You actually have lots of expectations from different people for different reasons. Okay? And most of the time, these people don't know what your expectations are, which means there's nothing for them to do but fail. And every time they fail, you're going to have to figure out how to forgive them. So if you can follow this back to the beginning stages, which is, number one, I'm going to assess my expectations of you. Number two, I'm going to assess if I actually believe that you're capable of fulfilling what my expectations are. Okay, that's really, really, really important. Because if you get real honest in some of these relationships where you're having difficulty forgiving, if you get real honest and you look at the dynamic and you ask these questions, if you rewind it all the way back to the beginning of the relationship and go, how aware was I? Was I really seeing this person for who they are? Was I really paying attention to how this person behaves? Was I really paying attention to what level of kindness this person is able to emit and demonstrate? Or was I just assuming that this person was at some level that I could create these expectations being fulfilled? Most of the time, it's that you are assuming something. Okay? So if you go all the way back and you look at this individual that perhaps you're having difficulty forgiving, and you ask yourself, what are my expectations of this person? What have my expectations of this person been? And then you write those down. And then you ask yourself, do I believe that this person is capable of fulfilling these expectations? You're going to find some interesting answers in there. A lot of the time, the answer you're going to get back is, no, I actually I don't believe that they're capable of fulfilling my expectations. In which case, you have yourself to forgive again. Because what it means is that you began a relationship journey on unstable and unrealistic and unaware grounds. And anytime you begin a relationship on those type of grounds, you're going to probably experience some kind of pain, because there's going to be something that you're going to assume that that person is then going to fall short of fulfilling. And you're going to feel hurt. And in feeling hurt, you're going to have to find a way to forgive that person. Okay? So if there's anyone in your life that you're having trouble forgiving, we really want you to do the exercise that we just gave you. We want you to go back and we want you to pay attention to where you were at the beginning of that relationship. And we want you to pay attention to where they were at the beginning of that relationship. And then we want you to write down all of the expectations that you had of them that they did not fulfill. And then we want you to ask yourself, were they ever capable of fulfilling those? Or was that an assumption that I made? Okay? Because when you realize that it's an assumption that you made, it's going to start untangling the mess, which is the anger, basically. The anger cloud, the pig pit of nasty that's accumulated. The reason it's going to start untangling it is because you're going to realize your part in it. You're going to realize that you put expectations on someone who couldn't fulfill it. And so interestingly, it's going to put a lot of the, for lack of a better word, blame back on you. Because you're going to realize that you didn't put forth the most basic things necessary in a relationship. And you didn't put forth the time, the space, the patience, and the willingness to observe before you started expecting. Okay? Because, guys, you know, if you would approach relationships in this way, where the first year or two at least is to really examine who someone is, to get really honest about who someone is. If you guys would do that, then you wouldn't have so many expectations that are so easy to be unfulfilled. Your expectations would be more based on what you have observed. And often, which means you might not have any. Or if you did have any, they might not be on the very positive side of things. You might realize, oh, I can expect this person to never show up on time. I can expect this person to not take my feelings into consideration. I can expect this person to care much more about how they feel than how I feel. If you would just allow yourself time to examine people in an honest light, your expectations would be different regarding those people, okay? Now, then there's the expectations that you guys have, let's say, of your parents, right? You come into this world as a tiny little being, completely oblivious to this world and the hardships, and your parents are your first love. And from this first love, you have all the expectations you can imagine, because love is fulfilling and there's nothing that love can't fulfill. But from that space of being tiny, you don't understand that you've come into a world where everyone's broken. You've come into a world where everyone is still children that hasn't had their basic needs met the majority of their lives. And so the road of disappointment begins in that area, okay? So it's also important to apply what we're saying to your parents. Because if you could go back in time, and if you could have awareness as a child, we're not saying that you actually can, but we are saying that as an adult, this is a way to experience forgiveness regarding your parents, is to honestly go back in time and observe the behaviors over time, and then ask these questions. What was I expecting? And do I believe that it was capable for this person or these people to fulfill these expectations? Now, when you find an answer of yes, I actually believe it was possible for this person to fulfill this expectation. I just feel like they weren't fulfilling this expectation because they were lazy, or they didn't want to, or they wanted to be cruel, or whatever. Then you're at a new place where you have to decide, is this something that I want to talk with that person about and try to bring closure or resolution regarding this situation with this person? And if so, you can watch some of our other webinars, like The Art of Honesty, The Art of Relationships, to better understand how to approach someone in this type of scenario where you're wanting to have some type of closure or resolution. If the answer is no, I don't want to talk to that person, then that means that you have to come up with some ways of thinking that are going to let you off the hook, okay? Because like we've already explained, essentially forgiveness is regarding expectations and the ability to let go of them. So you've got to find out how you are able to let go of them now. We're not saying that you're going to be able to let go of what you already expected, but we are saying that when you carefully examine, honestly examine the dynamics and the individual, at this point in time, you are going to be able to let go of those expectations. And if you can let go of expectations in this moment, right now, then you stop further damage to yourself. Okay? And then if you decide, well, I don't necessarily need this person to apologize or anything like that, but I do want to speak out loud to this person what I expected from them, what they didn't fulfill, and how it hurt me. If someone feels safe enough for you to do that, then that's a good idea to do that. Okay? So do you guys understand what we've said so far? We can't see anyone. There's Susan. Hello, Susan. There's one chat. Do you guys have any questions? Do you have a question, Susan?
Yeah. I like in theory what you say, and then like because I wanted to better work with this person or this my boss or something. But then it gets so, then it just blindsides me that I'm pissed as shit at them. And they didn't even do anything. And so there's like this forgiveness, but it feels like I'm like a gerbil in the wheel doing all the, like all cycles of the process, including the forgiveness and the, I don't know. I'm not sure my question is clear. I'd like to get back to you with it.
Well, unfortunately, we couldn't hear about half of what you said, but let's see if we can kind of feel what you're asking. So you find yourself in a loop, basically, with these people, your bosses or whatever, where you're constantly doing this type of work with them, trying to understand your expectations and whatnot, but still finding that they're being unmet, and you don't know how to handle that. Is that correct?
Then anger just arises, and leave or yell or something, and I can't. But it's like a cyclical thing in my head, which doesn't even involve them. So I feel like an idiot, for it's all in my head all the time.
Yeah, well, that's often the case. And that's why we're approaching this subject in this way. Because the thing that goes on over and over in the head is, I've been wronged, I've been wronged, I've been wronged, I've been wronged. And when you don't have any type of closure from the other end, meaning you don't have someone else who's willing to kind of meet you halfway regarding your expectations, then it means that the same things are going to happen over and over again, right? And when it comes to a situation like your job, basically you feel like, well, I have to put up with this because this is my job. And if I don't put up with this, then I'm not going to have a job. So you have this default that happens where you start going, okay, anything that upsets me, if it's not blowing up in my face right that minute, I'm going to shove it over into this corner. And I'm going to allow the anger to just accumulate over here. We're not saying that you're doing it consciously. We're not saying that you're going, oh, look at this anger, I'm going to put it over here in the corner. We're saying that by default, anger exists and you shove it to the side because you just can't deal with it right then. And it feels like, oh, if I keep dealing with all of my anger, all I'm going to do is be angry all the time, right? So this happens in relationships a lot too, that in general, someone is extremely unsatisfied with the relationship, extremely unsatisfied with the dynamics, but because they don't feel like they can leave that relationship, they put up with it and keep brushing it under the rug. But eventually what happens when you keep brushing things under the rug? You have a giant lump in the rug, right? You have to pay attention to this mound that's in the middle of the floor. And when you pay attention to the mound, then you're back at the same spot, which is, oh, here I am again, dealing with anger about these same subjects, and I feel no resolution with these subjects. And this is truly where you guys have to really start to ask yourselves, how important is it for me to be in this relationship? And have I done everything I can to make this situation better? And if your honest answer is, I've done everything I can to make this situation better, then you really need to explore whether or not you need to be there, whether or not you need to be in that relationship, okay? Because if you have someone who's not willing to meet you halfway on anything that's hurting you, then naturally it's time to assess if that's a healthy relationship to stay involved in. Now, if you're not addressing it, if you're just saying, well, I just have to figure out how to deal with it because it's just, I don't have any power in this situation and it's not going to change, then that's a whole nother process, okay? And for that type of process, we would we would watch a few of our other webinars, because we actually do address these type of dynamics in the other webinars, especially the one for relationships. So it sounds to us, Susan, that there's some choices that you've got to make regarding the relationship that you're in with your bosses. And you're going to have to decide what direction you want to move with that. Because it sounds like you're stuck in a loop, and possibly been stuck in that loop for a long time. And there needs to be this kind of understanding point of, can these people fulfill the expectations I have or not? And if these people cannot fulfill the expectations that I have, can I drop the expectations? Can I stop having them? And you've got to be real honest with yourself in this area, because if the answer is no, I really can't, I cannot drop these expectations, then your only option is to get out. And that goes for any relationship. That goes for any relationship. This is the kind of thing that you have to ask yourself. And you have to really be honest with yourself about. Because if two people aren't willing to work at something together to create harmony and to create resolution, then you're on your own. And so you have to assess, can I come to a peaceful place on my own? Can I come to a peaceful place if everything remains exactly the same? Can I pull back every single expectation I have and instead write a new one? Write a new list of expectation that's based on the reality of the situation? And can I be fulfilled within that environment? And if your answer is no, then it means you need to start looking in another direction. You need to start working towards something else. Okay? This is for a job, this is for a friendship, this is for a romantic relationship, this is any of those above. All right? Did that answer your question, Susan? I can't see Susan anymore. Does anyone else have questions? There's nothing you can do about it.
I have a question. Can you hear me? It's Betty.
Yes, we can, Betty.
Yeah. What if the primary person that you need to forgive is yourself? You mentioned that before, but what if you are in the place where you don't trust yourself, you don't think that you have clarity when you in situations with other people, you don't think you're very good at discerning what's going on, and so you're kind of blaming yourself for the situations you find yourself in, and you're unable to forgive yourself.
Well, if we were in your shoes handling that topic, instead of focusing on forgiveness, we would focus on, how do I move forward in a way that helps cultivate self-trust, self-love, self-compassion? How do I make choices that bring me better results than what I've been getting? Okay? Because when you get kind of locked into the self-forgiveness component of it, often what we notice is that what's being ignored is the practical approach of, how do I improve this? All right? So if you're making decisions and those decisions are continuing to cultivate a mistrust in yourself, if that's a word, then you need to assess, what decisions could I make that would be different and that would cultivate trust in myself? Okay? And to become very clear with yourself about what that would be, okay? So let's just say something easy. You have a friend, and that friend, they ask for favors a lot of the time. And every time they ask for a favor, you say yes. And every time you fulfill that favor, you feel like, oh my gosh, I just got taken advantage of again. And so what happens is you start feeling an anger toward yourself because of your inability to say no, right?
Mhm.
So that's
Yes.
a behavior that you could actually change, pretty simple behavior that you could change that would yield different results quite quickly. And so the forgiveness component would just naturally occur because you gave yourself enough care, enough attention to know what you were doing that was causing the pain, and then you changed it. There's nothing better than that type of resolution. Yeah.
Yeah.
Consider if it was someone else. If it's someone else and they're doing something that you don't want to accept or that's causing you to mistrust them, and you communicate to them, when you make this decision, when you do this way, I feel very distressing of you. And that person goes, oh, well, I just won't do that anymore. I will change that. Then by their new behaviors, the forgiveness comes naturally, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
So that's how you want to approach it with yourself. You want to examine what choices you're making that are causing you pain and change those choices, change those decisions in your future endeavors. Now, what you're going to find is that a lot of times you have a habit so that's why we use the yes no scenario, because a lot of people have a habit of just saying yes, 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 and they don't know how to say no, and then they get mad at themselves and mad at the other person, and they feel like a doormat, and they might even realize, oh my gosh, I just do not say no enough. I need to know when to say no. I'm not saying no. But then the occasion arises again, somebody asks for a favor, and they automatically say yes, and like, dang, yes again. And so a lot of times you're going to have to change a habit. And when you're changing a habit, it's hard, okay? Especially like most of the time when someone can't say no to something, it's because they have a deep need for acceptance. And they feel like if they don't say yes, that they're going to be in a place of rejection, okay? And so in that type of scenario, which is often the case, we would say, go and listen to our webinar on the art of transforming emotions. Because when you start understanding that your behavior is the behaviors that you are engaging in are coming from this space of, well, I'm afraid I'm not going to be accepted. And you go and you work with that feeling of unacceptance and you transform it into self-acceptance. And it's much easier naturally to change the behavior to say, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. Will you do this favor for me? No, I won't. Because at that point, now you are feeling your own acceptance of yourself. You're much less afraid to be rejected or unaccepted by others. So saying no is easier. Okay? So those are two different ways to approach that. Does that make sense to you, Betty?
Yeah, it sure does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have a question? Keith, do you have any questions?
If you have, I guess we talked already, but you have a pattern of a person that, I guess it comes down to expectations. I'm trying to formulate a question around a situation where you have a person that used to behave a certain way, and that was their pattern, but you suspect over time they have changed. You're just not sure why their behavior seems different, and you're not sure if it's trustworthy or not. This new pattern that you hope is their new pattern of behavior, which is preferable to the old pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to forgive them for what and let go of what they did, but you're just not sure that the new pattern is trustworthy. What's the answer to that? How do you get that? How do you accept the new reality for that person that you hope is the new reality?
Well, did you guys all hear what he said? No one's answering. So what he said, what did you hear, Betty?
Yes, I sure did. Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, everyone heard you. Good. Well, in that situation, we would really practice encouraging the new behavior. All right. So we would focus less on ourselves in that scenario. If you have someone who is really willing to work at something with you and is obviously changing their behavior, you have to remember that behavior is based on habit. And if they are changing a habit, that takes some time. And the best thing you can do is to encourage the change of habit, to encourage the new way of being, to respond to the new way of being, to notice the new way of being. Even if you have your own disgruntledness about the old way of being, if someone is genuinely working to change it, then you genuinely need to focus on that. Because what happens if you're not able to lend encouragement in that regard, then you are going to reinforce the old habit. Because like we said, all these things have a dynamic, and you have to realize you're a part of the dynamic. And when someone is causing a lot of trouble with a certain behavior, and then you're responding to that behavior, and this happens a lot with parents and children, like a trouble child, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And the parents are just used to that child being a troublemaker, blah, blah, blah. And so they get in the habit of expecting that type of behavior from the child. And so maybe the child is actually really trying to work on some things and change some things, but it takes time because that child has also established a habit. Well, the parents have established a habit of responding to that troublemaking. So the parents are also going to have to really focus on every little thing that child is doing that is an obvious movement in another direction.
To positive reinforcement.
To start reinforcing a different way of being, not only with the child, but with themselves. They're going to have to train themselves to see good behavior, essentially, instead of being stuck in the old behavior.
Constantly monitoring for the old behavior's existence still.
And the reason that exists is because they're afraid. They become afraid that their worst fears are going to happen if they don't point out the negative behavior and let that person know it's not okay. But the thing is, after you've pointed something out a couple of times, the person knows it's not okay. So you don't have to keep pointing it out over and over again. You need to help create resolution or help create improvement with that other person. And as you create a new dynamic with them, then the ability to forgive the old behavior, again, happens very easily because you've created a new dynamic. Do you understand what we're saying? So also what we're not so subtly implying is that forgiveness has to do with dynamics, okay? And the ability to move forward in a certain way, either with another individual or a group of individuals or just inside yourself. You have to create a new dynamic, a healthier dynamic within you and with someone else. If the dynamic cannot be created healthier with the other person because they're not interested, then all that's left is for you to create a healthier dynamic within you, which often means disconnecting from that individual so that the untangling can begin. Because if you come to a place where you realize every single expectation I have, it cannot be met by this person, then you're damaging that person by being in the relationship with them. If there is no way for that person to fulfill your expectations, it's going to lower their self-esteem. You're not going to help them get better. You're going to help them get worse. Do you understand what we're saying? And this happens all the time in your world. People aren't realizing that this is how this type of dysfunction gets more intense, is by not realizing this person is never going to be able to fulfill these expectations that I have. So for my own well-being and for their well-being, I have to disconnect. I have to stop engaging. I have to find a new path. And if you genuinely find that you cannot pull back your expectations in a relationship, then you definitely have to unplug from it. Okay? And you've been through a divorce. Would you say that this is true information?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So forgiveness, ultimately, guys, is about being able to untangle and being able to let go and being able to move forward in a healthier way. Okay? That's essentially all it is. And eventually, if you are a deeply spiritual individual, and especially if you study with us, we teach you over the course of time how to be at such a level that forgiveness is not even really in the equation. Because when you are conducting life in the way that we know how to conduct life, you do not ever begin anything with the type of expectation that sets you up for deep wounding. You're in too much awareness to do such a thing. So when someone commits some type of atrocity, you're not even surprised because you clearly saw that person anyway. You saw that that capability was in them. So it wasn't really surprising. Okay? Do you understand what we're saying by that?
Mm-hmm.
That's how we look at humanity. This is how we can continually help and love humanity. Okay? Because we see and feel all of you all the time. And there are plenty of humans committing extreme atrocities on a daily basis. But for us, there's no need to forgive because we know why they're behaving in that way. We feel what's contributing to their behavior. We understand the wounding that's already within them that's contributing to their behavior. So we do not have expectations that are misaligned, okay? And therefore we never have any reason to forgive. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Are there any other questions? We have someone in the chat. No, we don't. Well, if there are no other questions, then Betty, did you have another question?
I have another question if no one else has anything pressing. When we cross over to the other side, will we get more clarity? Will we be able to see the big picture more about where someone's been and what contributed to their behavior and what contributed to whatever dynamic we had with them? Will we, if we don't get clarity here, will we get more once, will we be able to see the big picture more?
Well, yes, but if we were in your shoes, we would really try to get that clarity in this life.
Yeah.
Because it's in this life that it's causing you pain.
Right, that's true.
So if there's an area where you're having issue with finding clarity, then, well, reach out to us, Betty.
Okay.
We can help you with the clarity on that. It's interesting, isn't it, that in your world, forgiveness is given such this kind of martyrdom type thing. Like, oh, I've forgiven. I'm such a good person because I forgave. But really, when you look at the reality of this word, what it really means, there's no martyrdom in it. There's really nothing about it that's all that impressive, okay? Other than you were able to think. You were able to find different ways of thinking that helped you untangle yourself from a dynamic that was unhealthy. And through that, you were able to let go. That's essentially what forgiveness is. It's a lot less mysterious and less holy than you like to think. It's actually more about problem solving and honesty and the ability to assess your own level of expectation and assess your own ability to be brave enough to move forward in areas that are difficult to move forward, and to be brave enough in areas to foster trust in others. And then to be brave enough to leave when you know that trust cannot be fostered. Okay? We enjoy you all being on this webinar today, and we'll see you all soon.